Division One, big first Division One player on the podcast. We'll have to figure out
True.
when we're gonna get the Division Zero folks on the podcast. But yeah, welcome back
Next
to
week,
another
maybe, you know?
episode. Officially a longer lived project than Win Conditions.
We got there. Congrats,
We
Lego.
got there. We did a second podcast, which is two more than I thought we would be doing. But we're here
Yeah.
and we're ready to rock. And we got a bit of an action-packed schedule. And obviously, sorry for the technical issues at the start, but let's just dive straight into it. No need to dilly-dally. We've got our name. We've got our topics, so let's just dig right in because a whole week of bingo just went by, and we're needing to unpack what happened because there's definitely was a lot that happened. So why don't we get started with the elephant in the room, or rather the samurai in the room? Samu went 2-0 this week in Division 1, which included a win over Ramato. Ramato dropping to 7-2. This puts Samu right like in with the head-to-head in first place, or rather not in first place, but in second place. Yeah, and you can see that popping up right there as I'm checking the playoff situation, courtesy of Mason. Thank you so much for putting that together. But that
Yep.
Ramato match was definitely a really interesting match to both watch as well as for its implications for week 7 and 8. I know Jeff, you were commentating it. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so Amu's start was strong. He showed up, and I remember Bianco was strong, and there was a lot of synergies with Delfino Blues. He did one Bianco shine and set up for the Delfino Blues, and into some Delfino shines after that. And Ramato rushed three Delfino Reds, which is probably one of his weakest starts we've seen this tournament. And yeah, I mean, Samu was just prepared. He had a failsafe for pretty much anything Ramato did, and I don't think Ramato's start was strong. And after being sniped to both three Fruit Ladies and 15 Delfino, you're hurting. And there were ways Ramato could have won. Of course, it was not over, but yeah, it was tough. I think had the better of the two routes. I think this match may have lit a fire under Ramato. We're seeing this week he is scrimming again. He's like scrimmed 5 times since the Samu match, which I think maybe was a little bit of a wake up call, just dropping the match to both Trey and not Trey, Sid and Samu. Just telling him like, yeah, I've been doing any percent recently. I've been doing 96 shines, 79 shines, but I think it told Ramato I need to be practicing, and I think his next few matches are going to be tough. But I
Mm-hmm.
think he is probably thinking about trying to quote unquote return to form. I think he realizes he's a little off his game recently, and
Mm-hmm.
I think his next two matches,
Yeah.
Ramato's going to show up with something to prove.
Yeah, I really want to touch on because you identified sort of the strength of Bianco on that card, and I want to dig into that a bit more. Right, Samu obviously started Bianco for Floodless in that match. Was sort of like doing Fruit Ladies, like got Banana Lady done sort of ahead of schedule, right, and then transitioned pretty cleanly into finishing out three Fruit Ladies, into 15 Delfinos, and it felt like Ramato after that point was sort of playing catch up with like a blues focused game, and sort of didn't respect the initial threat of like Samu committing to 15 Delfinos post three Fruit Ladies. Because there was like this moment in the opening minutes of the match where like, okay, Ramato gets sniped, but then he tries to finish 15 Delfinos anyway, but then Samu clicks it ahead of time. And essentially, Ramato then feels forced into sort of a blues rush. He tries to go for 20 for 2 in Pinna, right? Like Ramato gets first to Pinna, clicks 16 Pinna blues, but then is stuck sort of getting 4 more blues, which slows him down enough to lose
Yeah,
like 5 from the back hoverless, and then he's trapped into doing this valueless, lily pad no fruit clipping shine, which he wins ahead of Samu, but that's a shine that literally provides no value for him because he's already completed it. Meanwhile, Samu gets an extra red coin, which sets him up to threaten 6 reds later on in the match and makes Ramato have to defend it. And then Samu commits, obviously, the final call to commit to Hundreds in the Secret and Bianco. Ramato has left up 20 from 2 this whole match, trying to close it out, and it ends up being that it's just too much at that point for Ramato to really come back from. And Ramato, the other thing I want to touch on is Ramato's delays during that match were uncharacteristic. Looking back at them, I was thinking about sort of like the delays on Eel, right? Or rather, the Eel was rough, as it were, but there were a number of delays in the match that ended up not providing a ton of information. I think one of the most characteristic ones that stuck to me, there was 8 from 1 on the card, and Samu and Ramato clicks pin a Shadow Mario and 2 hiddens 1 level in sequence to each other, and then doesn't click 8 from 1. Which to me was sort of okay, do you not trust Samu to put together the fact that you just clicked 8 from 1 with Pinish, or you click 2 hiddens 1 level with Pinish Shadow Mario and you don't have 8 from 1? It just felt uncharacteristic from the bingo goat, as it were.
I don't know. The way I see it is that the start, people like to say how, for example, in the invasion format, right? Start means everything, right? But even in something like Lockout, if you're a Motto and the only thing you have over Samu is these 3 Delfino reds because you lost to Bianco Progress and you lost to Delfino Blues and Fruit Ladies, not only are you playing catch up the whole time, you also need to play for more goals at that point. And it's just so much harder because you need to win at that point. It was 4-1, I think, after a couple clicks. So if you need to win 12 goals and your opponent only needs to win 9, right? That just from a numbers perspective. And again, comebacks do happen because people build up different setup and have leads to different goals. But at that point, Ramato really had no lead to anything.
Yeah, so the 3 reds play was, I think, just strong. I talked it over with a few people who agreed with me. There were no pipes on the card, which Lonely Pad and Grass Pipe will give you. There were no sheer Delfinos. I think it was 12 Delfinos with blue trades, which still a good goal. Reds, it was 3 reds and 6 reds. So while that is important, it's not the greatest Reds card we've seen, and Gelato wasn't good either. And you may think, why does Gelato matter too much? 3 Reds into Gelato can be a fine play. You do it with Underbell, and you can get 5 shines and be there right away. Gelato did not provide much, if at all. So it just felt like a play that, combined with Fruit Ladies, was just anemic through the start, in my opinion. It just could not. Samu getting both Bianco Reds and the Delfino Blues was just much almost for Ramato to overcome. And granted, he almost brought it back, but it's tough from there.
Yep. And I mean, I think what's also interesting is how this is going to affect, as we said, now Ramato technically in 3rd place, which I don't think coming into the season, right? Would you guys have called this? I know I would not have.
No, definitely not, right? And everybody sort of acknowledged that Samu had the chops to really compete in bingo. But I think there's still sort of this discounting of Samurai Man in the scene that I think is really being put to rest here. Samu's been on a tear, scrimming a lot lately, has really been putting up some fantastic results. And Ramato, like you mentioned, is going into 2 really hard matches to close out the season. He's going to be playing Shadow Mario 27, the number 1 ranked player. And is going to be playing Danny, who is sort of like a mental block for him, as the joke goes. Ramato and Danny have a pretty long history with each other, and Danny's also the presumptive 4th place currently in the rankings. So it's going to be a tough 2 weeks for Ramato coming down to the end of the season. So will the Ramato of lore show up, or will Ramato continue to to play sort of these rough rough matches.
I think the thing is as well is look at last season, right? You look at the first season of the league. Ramato, for the most part, was very untouchable. He lost to Larvey in a pretty off match for him, granted. And just Ario was not really, that was usually like the second place. He kind of wasn't playing to the top of his level, had a few forfeits from what I remember. And it was just, I think Samu has improved a ton since last season. So I think back then it was just the gap between Ramato and Samu was a bit much for top two. Even at least then, nowadays, obviously improved quite a lot. And I just think maybe Ramato got a bit complacent almost, saying like, yeah, I am not really being challenged here. Bingo season starts, didn't scrim that much, like I said. So I think the people are catching up is the main thing, and I think Ramato's gonna have to start playing at the top of his level again with scrims like that.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. I don't think anybody is saying to count Ramato out though. Ramato is still
of course
one of the most dominant forces in bingo, and especially as we enter playoffs, right? Like best of threes, Ramato has shown sort of immense fortitude in, and so I think it'd be a little premature to say this is the end of Ramato's reign, but definitely a few cracks in the throne, as the expression goes. So anything else jump out at you guys for Division 1 this week? That was sort of the big story for me, I think, was this Samu Ramato match.
I don't think of any Division 1 matches that are like out of the ordinary. There were definitely some good matches this week. I don't have any that outright pop out to me. I don't mind moving on to the others unless you guys have something that I am forgetting.
I see it the same way. I think like kind of the dethroning of the king kind of takes the cake here for the storyline this week, but
yeah,
you never know, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it sort of overshadows the rest of what went on, right? Danny notching a win over Pogo is pretty big, right? Larvey getting a win over Bry, same sort of deal, right? But it all sort of fades in the background to this particular Ramato result. But I think we're able to move on to Division 2 here, and another player making a bit of a tear, PK, on a 3-win streak entering week 6, after sort of a rough start to the season, has notched like 3 pretty significant wins, all in a row. He got a win against Elias, he got a win against Mason, and he got a win against Linky. Playing Game and Tober in these next in this weekend even. Do you think the PK of legend has arrived, or do you think that this is just a momentary blip of success?
I mean, I think at the start of the season, there was pretty broad consensus that PK was underperforming his expectations, and I think his results also, kind of reflected that. He had really close matches in a lot of games. What I know jumps out to me is his match against Peaches in Invasion, which I know isn't PK's strongest format, and he still kind of went off. So I think that's worth pointing out. I think his match against Tober is going to be really important. Like, can he win? Because Tober's like this very strong player. He's top 4, I think, currently. So
Let me grab the sheet here. Yeah, Tober's in top 4 right now, 6-3 record. Again, another very strong player entering these last couple weeks. So definitely will be a tough opponent for PK.
Yep.
Yeah. So my criteria for looking at a bingo player, I look at 3 separate things. I look at routing ability, and this is a little weird, but this is just how I personally look at routing ability. I look at gameplay. I look at execution. I think PK is probably the best router. It can easily route in Division 1, and I think that is his strongest. But when you get to like more of the, I think execution it becomes a little tough sometimes. I think we've seen PK. Well, he does have some pretty good wins so far. It's having a few vulnerabilities that were exposed early season. And I think for the most part, maybe just playing more matches just back to back, he's just starting to get on that groove with executing the routes that he's able to come up with. The route against Mason was by far one of the best Div 2 matches. Just a really clean route. And I think his execution level was untested for the most part, just because he doesn't do a lot of scrims, really. And just getting on that train, getting the ball rolling in these Division 2 matches, I think having a rough start and picking up steam as the season goes is very fair for a player the likes of PK. So his next matches should be interesting. I think Tober is pretty favored against PK, honestly, especially because it's Invasion. And Tober is really good at Invasion, in my opinion. That is his best format. And game, probably more even, but PK is favored in that, I would say. I think he will be a scary player if he makes playoffs. And even if he's 7th or 8th somehow, he might just have the potential to climb all the way up to the top 2.
Can I ask about your criteria? Because you say you split it into routing, gameplay, and execution, yes?
Yes.
So
That's how I
can you
look at a player.
explain sort of like what's contained in gameplay as opposed to execution? Because like just looking
Yeah,
at that, uh,
So yeah, so gameplay is just speed.
mhm.
It's your times. Granted, you can't really judge a bingo player by their any percent times or 120 times, but it's just a general sum. Just maybe from what I've seen in their streams, their matches, and what we know about them. Like we know JJ, for example, has a low 114, can 113. Um,
Mm.
Routing, I essentially look at prior history and legacy within bingo. I think you get a pretty clear picture of who is the greater routers. Like Bragai is one of the best routers of all time. And that just comes from legacy and what I've seen in matches. Keep in mind, I am a commentator on a lot of matches, so this is where I kind of build these criteria. I've just seen so many of almost everyone's matches by now. And execution is like the type of thing where it's like you can be like you can have great gameplay, you can be a great router in theory, like you could have these amazing scrims, right? Like PK, and show up in matches and your nerves are overtaking you. All of a sudden you're doing, maybe not a great play, you're choking. So that's what I mean by execution really, is how well you can take advantage of your two strengths, and really show that you have those two, despite what your legacy and prior stats may say.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think everybody builds these mental models of how they want to evaluate players, and it's always interesting to like dig into what, because everybody values different aspects of gameplay and bingo separately, and bingo is pretty unique in that it taxes all of these different matrices, all these different axes upon which you can evaluate your own play, whether it's technical ability, whether it's mid-game decision making, whether it's mental fortitude, right? Like everything gets put together and blended into that discussion of what makes a really strong bingo player. And it's interesting to see, right? Like you could put forth the thesis, right, that PK's performance early in the season may be attributed to like nerves, or like inability to play under pressure, right? Or like when you're in a scrim, it's different from when you're, because PK's definitely a scrim monster. Very scary opponent in scrims, but just wasn't showing that until now. He's hidden his groove. The chains are off, and he's really going to the races. Speaking of someone else who's going to the races, Gravity Beetle had a big win this week over MD
That was a
Mason
match.
85, which was sort of the presumptive second place leader in Division 2 at the time. Still is, with a 7-2 record, don't get me wrong, but that was a huge win for GB. And has really complicated the playoff picture more than a little bit. I thought that match was pretty great for GB, all things considered.
That was a crazy match. Just like even like implications aside, This is the biggest comeback we've seen in so long. Like,
Yeah.
remember, the score was at 1.6 to 1 in goals, and GB won via regular lockout. And him just leveraging this sort of win condition and Mason a little bit like over focusing it, just like GB was very much able to take advantage of that and get to 13 goals just in time before Mason finished his Connect 5 with Piantissimos.
Yeah, that was one of the best matches I think I've ever seen GB play. It looked so over, like it looked really rough in the start, and that comeback was insane. But what it came down to was middle goal was Delfino Rocket. GB, I don't know if he said he didn't really intend for this, but he got like 3 of the 5 goals in that row. And Mason just felt like he had to rush Delfino Rocket Nozzle and had 1 shine in Pinna at the time and had to get to 30 shines. Meanwhile, while Mason's doing all that, GB like kind of set up for it, but started using that time period to work on his 2 from 7, to work on other goals on the card. And it was even if he didn't intend it, it was a great bait because Mason spent the whole match just trying to get that rocket, and it just gave GB perfect time to get back into.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's a great way of summing it up, right? And like it sort of blends back to Connect 5 being a format that's often perceived as favoring the speedy side, right? GB definitely not the winner of speed in that matchup against Mason, but was able to sort of exploit the format's unique quirks to pull himself ahead. I did mention that win over Mason did complicate the playoff picture. Well, it complicated it for everybody else. There's one person who is very happy with that particular result. Peaches is the only player in the SMS Bingo League to have a clinched bye. Again, thanks Mason for running these numbers. I would have had no idea otherwise, but Peaches has a confirmed bye entering playoffs, which is huge. Now, Mason, GB, and Tober have all clinched their spot in the playoffs running. But to have a bye, one less best of 3 to play for Peaches, that's got to be huge entering into the last 2 weeks of the season. A little bit of the pressure's got to be off. Obviously, Peaches probably wants 2 buys, wants to get both of the potential buys here, but still it's a pretty big win to get.
It's also a pretty big ask for anyone like Peaches needs to lose twice and to Mason, or Peaches would need to, I think, lose all 3 matches to not get the double bye and then lose in a tiebreaker or something. So like Peaches is looking very strong at the top of Division
And
2. It's what an 8-0 record
yeah,
does.
and I don't know if anyone saw it coming. Honestly, like Peaches is just playing really well. And just he was last year, Div 3, and I remember his early matches didn't really look to be that strong. And I think even going into this season, people thought he'd be in like the lower half of Division 2, but he's almost playing at a close to a Div 1 level. Probably isn't there yet. To be just he's just climbing the ranks. It's just becoming almost as good as Mason and GB, who've been playing the game for years. So huge shout outs to Peaches. Insane work he's put into the game.
I don't understand all the Peaches doubters, all right? Ever since me and Peaches played, even though he rushed 4 from Pianta and like did a horrible route and lost, like at that moment I was like, Peaches A is super dedicated to improve, and B, he's a genius and he's good at the game. So he's got it all right. All the ladies are swooning like
the correct confluence of factors, I suppose. Games and the Giant Peaches, a Division 2 story. That is true. Peaches is playing. Peaches has already played game, so there is no game in the Giant Peaches. But there is the Giant Peaches versus Elias and Rasmus this weekend. 2 pretty key matches. Elias has shown the capacity to surprise. So has Rasmus. So maybe they'll pull off the upset, but I think the big one to keep an eye out for is definitely the Week 8 Mason versus Peaches is going to be probably one of the deciding factors of maybe not for necessarily Peaches' playoff chances, but Mason this maybe end up being a must win for him to get a bye.
Yeah, and I want to say like don't count out Rasmus. I think probably one of the lesser talked players in Division Two, but if we've seen him go up in some matches. This just the one that comes to mind is the one against Tober
Yeah.
with this really strong route. And I think honestly like Peaches could lose to Rasmus here. Whether or not it happens, that's left to be seen. But I think that Peaches has a very realistic shot at maybe getting a loss somewhere between Mason and Rasmus. Elias, I think, can outroute him, but it may. That's one of the matches where it just becomes a little tough, just in terms of skill gaps and all that. But I think he doesn't have this clinched, but I think he's on a very good trajectory right now.
Yeah. No, Peach is definitely looking strong.
Yeah, very exciting. The landscape in Division Two, changing ever by the week. So definitely don't miss these week 7 matches. They're going to put a lot more into clarity. But speaking of clarity, Division 3 is about as clear as mud. But there is one clear point. That transition was great, by the way. Nobody's allowed to talk shit
proud.
about that.
I'm proud.
Because and nobody can talk shit about Tom Dollars. Now 7-1. Won his last 7 matches in a row, beat Wild Jeff in a nail biter. Is there anyone that can stop Tom Dollars?
I will
Division
say Tom does have the losing record to Libre from that one week 1 match that he did
Yes.
game over in.
Yeah, but that makes it more
that's
interesting.
far in
Right?
the
Like
past. Yeah.
his loss is not even like we don't know how that match would have played out, but it was just as far as we know, it's just because he game over in the first like 10 minutes or something. Like that's kind of puts it
We don't
in
know.
perspective. Like his loss is a loss, of course, but it's not like we really got to see how that match would have actually played out.
I will say Tom definitely has difficult matches ahead, specifically Dex and Jukatox. Dex, I think, one of the most improved players in Div 3A, from my understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and has kind of been doing very well. And Juka, again, number 1, 7-1 as well. So a lot of potential for like this is I think Tom Dollar's real test,
Yeah,
whether he
he's
can
out of
consistently
the
put up that showing.
yeah, and and like the picture right now, I think in Division 3 is sort of between the haves and the haves nots, as it were. You've got sort of a pretty clear division, and despite the fact that not everyone's got a clinched playoff berth at this point, there's a pretty clear picture for playoffs too, right? Both Division 3A and Division 3B have 5 players that have clinched playoff berths, and they are the top 5 right now. There's sort of this middle core of people fighting for the remaining 3, and then obviously you've got people sort of hunting for their first win, or maybe only having 1 win that could still like make a pretty big late season run. So with the playoff picture starting to really crystallize here, is there anybody that you think like any particular matchup you're looking to see or looking forward to entering the playoffs? Because that's the first time we're going to see Division 3A clash against Division 3B.
I think there's a lot of potential for interesting matches. Again, I can't like call a match because again, like they're very specific and no individual placement is really decided yet. Especially from like 5 to 8. But I am curious to see those who are sort of in the middle core fighting for playoffs, like how they can do against sort of the bottom of the top of the other division. So players like KO Mojungo against, say, I guess Wild Jeff and Yato, and vice versa for Darkman and Jail versus theoretically me and Pinkish if the standings stay as they do. But there's still a lot of potential for movement.
Yeah, Div 3 is very interesting because you have the current standings, right? But when these players scrim, we can get some wild results. Like Ibre beat Urbani in a scrim, and Urbani is undefeated in his visual division. And
Dex did as well, yeah.
Dex as well, and Dex, Dex is showing some teeth. He almost won against Mason in a scrim, not the other day, and it pretty much just came down to a few gameplay mistakes at the end, from what I remember, that costed him. So Dex is a lot scarier than I think his current place of 4 in the standings is looking.
For
and
sure.
then we have people like Kao. I'm so bad at pronouncing it. Sorry. Who
KO.
Kao. Okay. So
Got you.
you look at his like record and you may think like, oh yeah, maybe not the most insane player, but he has wins against like some of the top Div 3 players in scrims, and probably just take that to the playoffs if he can clutch the spot. So I think the scrims will paint a very clear picture of how Division 3 might pay out when the divisions cross.
Yeah, but I think there's also a difference in mentality in scrims versus a match, right? You can't sort of discount sort of the the pressures of a live match environment. Of course, these will mostly be in best of threes, so you're also sort of looking at the mental fatigue of a best of 3 and sort of having to be forced off of formats you may be strong in, formats you may be weak in, right? Like there's a lot to touch on there. And you also mentioned Urbani, right? Like I think it's also, yes, Urbani's undefeated right now, but even in this match against Mojongo this week, Urbani was looking vulnerable. Like there were times during that match where Mojongo could have like pulled out a pretty big upset. It just didn't really break his way by the end there. And so, seeing scrim results as like some Division 3 players from 3A are facing off against Urbani and are notching like not maybe sometimes wins, sometimes pretty convincing plays of themselves, right? Like it's making the playoff picture all the more interesting as we transition out of league play into the bracket stage.
Yeah, definitely curious to see how sort of the up and comers in their divisions who are trying to like reach that top echelon do in playoffs. And also, of course, the clash between the divisions. See, as the Division 3B podcast, we can clearly say, we are the better division. No questions to be asked here, but
maybe we'll have to answer that question another episode.
Yeah, we'll have to get a 2v2 podcast,
a 2v2 lockout bingo podcast.
Yeah.
Get some Division 3A reps on here. I think that's the plan. But yeah, that covers the 3 divisions and sort of your week 6 recap for this week of the Bingo League. Matches resume this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Over on, I believe we'll probably start on Bingothon. That's how we've done it these past couple weeks. But definitely check those out. And so now we can transition over, Jeff. As we mentioned, you're our special guest, and as is tradition on the First to 13 podcast, our guest comes up with the topic for the middle segment. So Jeff, what is what are we discussing now?
The tradition of all
the tradition. Hey, it's 2 episodes now. It's officially a tradition.
Yeah,
so
we get
what I thought I could bring to the table, first and foremost, is improvement. How you improve as a bingo player, how you start out, how you keep pushing on. Because I think something that was really strong about me as a player was I think I had a very quick path of just improvement. I started out playing bingo at the regular lockout tournament where I was essentially a Div 3 level. And didn't necessarily have the greatest of times until the league started last year, and from there it was clear to me that I was improving at bingo at a rate I was pretty happy with. Some people were saying I could have maybe played in Div 1 at the start of last season. I was considered when Reed dropped out, and I wanted to think about because I have a lot of people from Division 3 ask me how did you improve, where they ask for advice, and I wanted to kind of I guess just talk about that. Now, granted, myself in Division 1, I'm not really playing it the way I'd like to. Definitely not super proud of my results, and it's a little upsetting how the season's gone. So I'm not saying I'm like a bingo god or anything, but when you look at all the new players, just wondering how you improve and how you get your foot in the door. My main advice, and this is something I think cannot be understated, is scrim. If you want to improve, you just need to scrim. And I think there's this kind of like fear almost of playing players who are better than you. It's something I've noticed in scrims. And it's something I have generally tried to encourage to newer players is if someone, like I know there are people in Division 3 who ping the scrimmer role, and like Bry Guy, for example, will be like, hey, let's scrim. And they're like, oh man, I'm scared. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do. And it's important to take that scrim. It's very important to take that scrim because you will do a match and you will see what they do and how you could have done it better. I personally, even back then, don't find a lot of gain from scrimming players you maybe are better than, like significantly. And you can sit there and route cards all day, right? You can look at Bingo Sync and you can route cards, and that can help you a little bit, but you need to get that experience and to get the fundamentals down. And just being involved in the community in general, I think, is something. I did like 1 million commentaries last year, so even if you're not commentating the match, you can watch it and kind of talk with chat about it. People are always going to respond. Commentators, you can listen to what they have to say. And I think you can develop that basis of routing. But I think the main thing you should be doing is just scrim. Like if you are passionate and you have the time, I know some people do not have the time or just want to do this more for fun. Just scrim people who are better than you. You will learn a ton from it. Last season, I scrimmed everyone in Division 1 almost. I scrimmed Danny. I scrimmed Larvy like 10 times. And at first my matches against Larvy, like I lost every match against Larvy, but eventually like you learn how to play a Division 1 player, and suddenly like you start playing at that level almost. You can learn to play with them and talk to them after the match, say like, what did you do? You learn their starts. That's the main thing. Like you gotta scrim, and you gotta scrim people who are better than you. Like you don't have to, but I find that
but it helps. Yeah,
right.
It definitely
Playing up to a stronger opponent's always great. I think one of the problems that I've experienced, or one of the things that weighs on my mind when I'm thinking about scrimming as a mode of improvement, is scrimming is a two-way street, right? Not only are you trying to get something out of it, but you're also trying to give something to your opponent as well, right? Like you aren't playing against a vacuum, right? There's lots of ways you can work on your bingo skill. You can run ILs, you can run category extensions, right? There's a lot of like really relevant category extensions that are at least tangent to bingo, right? Like there's even memes like all M's, right? But that's like basically a Serena whenever practice, right?
Yeah.
And
blue locations.
Yeah, there's like 10 shines, no shines, or 12 shines, no shines that involves collecting a lot of blues, right? Or like fast blues or relevant blues in levels that also sort of can be adapted. There's all hundreds, right? Stuff like that, right? But in all of those, you're competing against yourself, right? You're competing against yourself in the game, right? But in a scrim, right, you're scrimming against another person who's giving their time and energy to help you improve. And you also want to give them something that they can use to help work and improve. And one of the problems that I feel like as a very slow player relative to my peers in even Division 3 is, am I providing enough of a value to that faster player, to that better player, to make it worthwhile to scrim me? And I think back to like one of the first scrims that I did, which I think was against Juan, right? And I basically got blown out in a row control match, like with a 9-goal route, and I only clicked 2 goals. And it was valuable to me, but I don't know if it was really valuable to Juan, right? And that sort of always weighs on me when I'm thinking about scrims is how can I make sure that I provide like the type of opponent, or an opponent that will provide value to who I'm scrimming with.
That's definitely something I worry about too. I know last season I was like, I knew like I'm the guy who's predicted to go 0-7. Like I'm just worried that, all these better players are just going to stop me and that they're going to be upset because they wasted their time. But this season, I don't know, I've scrimmed a couple Div 1 players like Jeff, like Samu, like Bry, and even though the matches weren't necessarily particularly close, like I think in some cases, like even my opponents were able to gain a little bit from it. And I definitely learned a lot. Like, definitely still have that notepad of all of Bry's comments after a match. A big shout out. But
Yeah. And Lego mentions the categories, which is something I want to touch on, like category extensions. Speed is very weird in SMS because there's like you may look at someone's any percent time and just think they are stupidly fast. But there is so much more to this game than any Giants. There are blues routes, there are hundreds, there are like 20 esque shines, there are hidden reds hoverless. There are so many things that bingo covers that any percent will just ever cover. And I think that two players who have any percent speeds, like someone who has a 118 versus someone who maybe even has a 115, but is more focused on the any percent side of things, just doesn't do a ton of other categories. That 118 person, if they have I'm kind of referring to myself, that bingo like speed where, and that's something I did to get better. I grinded 10 shines, no shines. I grinded every bingo IL on the sheet. And it's really something that I cannot understate. Like, I don't think you can just do any percent and expect to get better at bingo speed. You need to do some, like, the category extensions are so good for improving at bingo. Like, there are some players I know who they are good at routing, but their gameplay maybe just not always the cleanest. And sometimes that can be the missing puzzle piece, right? Like you give them 10 shines, no shines, you tell them grind, get a sub 25 or something, and suddenly like they're able to do these blues routes really quickly. And those are all like the missing puzzle pieces, right? Like your routing, your execution, you want to work on that. You do scrims, you need to work on your gameplay. You think you're a great router. You take a week off, you work on your 10 shines, no shines, all hundreds, you just do some ILs. It's part of the puzzle as well, but I do think that gameplay is not as important as the routing side of it, which is why I still prioritize the scrimming. But yeah, those are like the two general things I did to improve. And as I am in Div 1, I don't know if, those old tricks of just spamming scrims will help me improve at this point. I still got my own bit of a journey to go. Like I said, not super thrilled with my season, and really curious to see where I can go from here to improve and maybe be a stronger force in season 3. But as for my story up to today, I can share with, those Division 3 players and just anyone looking to get better. Like that's my words and tips. Like, do some scrims, just be active in the community, and it will happen with time. So that's how I view it. And ask questions. Like, ask questions. Like, no one will shame you for asking a question unless it's stupid.
Definitely. I would 100% agree with that. This, don't want to toot the horn of the bingo community too much, but I think that this is one of the. I think this is like every person says this about any community that they're embedded with, but this is the most welcoming, inclusive community that's always able to answer questions. But like everyone in almost any chat where bingo's going on is talking strategy, is talking like what routing decisions are going on, like what they would do, how they would react to various things. There's just a lot to absorb. Right. And I think you mentioned like commentary being a great way to do it. Watching matches is a great way to do it. Right. Like there's so much theory behind bingo, which is like part of the impetus of having this podcast. Right. Is part of the impetus is to like try to consolidate and formalize in more ways and in more avenues the rich knowledge that exists, right? And we just haven't had the opportunity or the space to really translate it from our heads onto spoken word or into written word, right? Even thinking like critically about your own play, right? Like I know Jeff, you had a practice that I've also adopted, where after every scrim and every match, you're like in a notepad, you're writing notes about like how the match went, what decisions you made, how you felt like you could do better, right? It's just like a good exercise to go back and think about the match that just happened, right? Maybe with a little bit of distance afterwards, and really look at it from a different perspective now that the actual gameplay is behind you.
Yeah, like you do a match, it's really match, scrim, anything. It's really good to learn from it. It's good to know what you did wrong. It's good to know, what you can improve on. I one of the players who I think has improved the most, and I don't like to call people out, but Mr. Yato has improved so much, and I am
Tell
so
him.
proud of him. He's last season, he did some matches, and I don't think he learned from some of these matches, right? And that's not a shot at him. I understand we all got lives, we all got things going on. It's totally understandable. But this season, a few people and himself, who's just been doing a lot of scrims, he started learning like, how can I improve?
Fast. Yeah.
What was I doing wrong that caused me to lose some matches last season, and has suddenly just become like one of the best players in Division 3. So taking, you could do a million matches, but if you're not, learning or getting anything out of it, like you're not going to take away much. But if you are sitting there and you want to learn and you want to say like, what did I do wrong here? You look at the card, you write some stuff down, you ask questions. You can ask anyone, and like they will say to you, this is probably what you should have done instead. Explain how they would have started, how they would have reacted to some clicks. Like scrims are not just there to play; they're there to learn from, and they're there to teach you lessons. Really.
Uh, there's two other things I guess that I think are really important to learning. One of them being watching back your matches if you can. So I know like if you play a scrim, a lot of the time like you might not stream it or something, right? But tournament matches definitely are streamed. So like listening to what the commentators have to say, especially because generally they will be more experienced. They will know what's good on a card or what a good play looks like. And also, there's just a lot to be gained. You can see what your opponent did, you can see what you did, and you can sort of take a lot from that. But another thing that I know I struggled with when I began bingo last season was just having knowledge on like even how to get every goal. Which
Yeah. That's a
might
huge one.
might seem kind of trivial, right? But if you have no experience, right, you don't know how to get both bell shines, right? Like you might not know how to do underbell, you might not know how to do Sereno whenever. Uh, and also you won't know blues routes, you won't know where 20 blues are available in each world in which episode. Definitely tried looking for 20 blues in Pianta 3 in my first match last tournament. And by the way, Jeff told me after that he thought that was true. That was possible in Red
Yeah,
20. So
I okay. I had a few kinks to
this
work
isn't a
out
shot,
last
by the way,
Ah.
Jeff. I know. You're good.
No,
But
but you're 100% right. The way goals are written, the way goals are balanced, assumes a certain level of baseline knowledge about the game, right? And like there's lots of resources. I know you can check out like the pinned like helpful resources stuff in the Discord, right? There's like links to the bingo spreadsheet with corrections by Mr. Mike Toilet, Toilet Michael,
Yep.
which is a fantastic resource for like understanding when blues are available, what blues are available, what types of goals exist, and what you need to do to achieve them. And you put that all together, right? Like your bingo assumes that you have this baseline knowledge of where are M's, where are turbos, what are the fast Delfinos, what are the sort of slow but easy Delfinos, right? Where are the red coins? How can I get the secrets? At what time should I, can I get bosses? Even not making the decision about when those goals are necessarily good to get. Bingo does sort of demand that you understand that you need to go to 16 for 16 Pianta Blues. You need to go to 3, and that 20 from 2 will not be achievable in Pianta until 6, unless you have Yoshi.
In which
And
case it's
so,
5.
in
Yeah.
which case it's 5. And so, just building up that internal memory of what goals mean and what they do will help your bingo game immensely, because then you'll be able to say, oh, I need 2 turbos. That means I need either Delfino Turbo and Bianco Turbo, or I need to go deep in Rico, or I need to do some whack gelato or Noki play, right? Like you start to see the goals for what they mean rather than what they're written as. And I think that that's a great way to level up your bingo play.
And 2 things I have to say about that is I think one of the most important examples of that is you look at something like Bianco, like 15 blues from Bianco and 20 blues from Bianco. Like, let's say they show up on the same card.
Yeah,
you
that's the
think,
quintessential.
You're like, oh, that's only 5 more blues. That's not too bad. If I'm going to do 15, I may as well stop for 20 blues. Yet you do those 5 extra blues. Maybe you are a little inexperienced at getting them. You fall a few times with the rocket or when the wall kicks to get the slower ones. Suddenly it's a 1 or 2 more minute investment. And I think at a baseline, it's about 1 minute. And you think, well,
you need an extra shine too.
And you think to yourself, yeah, you need Bianco 3. And you think to yourself, well, this is only an investment, right? Like it's only a little bit of time just for 1 gold. But you spend that time doing those blues. And suddenly you might be behind to Pinna for stopping for those 5 extra blues. And suddenly from there, you may be behind Inoki if you aren't able to do Delfinos or something to counter it. So it's all about the bigger picture. And you're saying, some of the gameplay specific things. What I'd like to do is after a scrim, like if something does not go well, or any matches, something doesn't go well with my gameplay, I like to say to myself, I like to take each individual thing. It can be something as I die once in Gelato 1R. I will sit there and single that out and practice it just for even 5 minutes, right? Just to understand, like, yeah, I died here. This cost me the goal or almost cost me the goal. I don't want to die again. So it's just taking the bits and pieces and taking away that little time to just refine your gameplay can go a long way, as well as just understanding what those goals mean and how they fit into your route.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. I also think of like Bianco or like 2 Hidden Reds hoverless as like a goal that is the bugbear of Division 3, and how it's, how not knowing what the strats are can make your life exponentially harder. Whereas even knowing the strats at a very basic level and playing it super safe saves you inordinate amounts of time, right? And so, it again sort of comes back to, I think the way that I've described it to some people is, I know some people are like big IL grinders, right? They like to grind like a specific IL to completion, right? They want to basically get it down to absolute perfection that they know like their limit. Bingo
Call out, but okay.
Bingo is beneficial to that, but it is more beneficial to know how to do a bunch of things half-assed than it does necessarily to know how to do one thing very good and a bunch of things not at all, right? And half-assed is sort of the wrong word, right? But like putting in like 30 minutes to understand like a blue route, or putting in 30 minutes to understand this is what the hundreds route looks like will turn a 6, 7, 8, 9 minute hundreds into a 4 and 5 minute hundreds, which already is saving you a ton of time. Just from the fact that you know what the route's supposed to look like and you can execute what that needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like some goals, I've seen some players have this really good play before. They make this really strong call but their gameplay maybe just does not back it up. Like they make a call to do something that requires like Rico 4, and they start dying a lot in Rico 4, and I'm just trying to think of a very vague example. Or
Can you
hitting red
stop calling me
colorless.
out, like both of you?
I wasn't calling you
really
out,
died
Tomato. Come on.
I died 7 times in Rico 4 in one of my matches, and I'm the guy who grinds Serena 18 for like 20 hours. All right, you didn't? All right, so
I wasn't intending to call out your Serena 18.
I
love.
know, I kid.
But yeah, like gameplay does matter to an extent, and I've seen some players come up with like a really good call, and then their gameplay maybe just does not account for it, and it can end up taking, 100s can just take like 7 minutes, and those extra 3 minutes is just giving the opponent, another goal. So yeah, it just comes down to some of the knowledge, as you were talking about, and kind of experience and understanding of what you can work on.
Mm-hmm.
All very good points, and some great insight from you, Jeff. Especially given, like you said, you sort of improved a lot very fast, which is, I think, gives what you're saying some weight. The rest of us will have to try our best to catch up, though. I don't know, Tomato.
Yeah.
Are we getting into Division 1? Getting into Division 1 next season, you and I?
Next season, I don't know about that one. Maybe 20 years, but
we'll have to set our sights on the top of Division 3 and being first and second and getting into Division 2 first, I think.
Yeah, that could also take a while.
That may also take a while. We'll see. All right, so let's move on to your topic, Tomato, because I think we've covered improving at bingo a lot, and I think that this topic's tangent to that as well.
Yeah, that's correct. And today's topic is going to be, how much does gameplay or speed matter in a match? And I mean, I think this is something that's kind of tangent to all of us. We're, I think, relatively slow in our divisions for the most part compared to the majority of the field. I don't know if that's entirely true for Jeff. His any percent kind of do be lowering, but
Well, Jeff's also got an interesting insight on this, right? Because he went from being the speed bully of Division 2 to being essentially speed bullied in Division 1, and so he's probably got a good barometer on this particular debate, and it's a debate that's as old as time, right? It is the commentators talk about it, we're talking about it, everyone's talking about it. The speed bullies versus the routing geniuses. Is part of it, but it's also how fast can you play versus how well can you play. Consistency over raw speed. So, Jeff, what are your initial thoughts on hearing this topic brought up yet again?
Yeah, so it was really interesting to just be a fast player in Division 2. It was interesting because people often would say I was speed bullying, but there were players who were faster than me. Papacino is significantly faster than me. Rick Rex was significantly faster than me, and Electric Miles was faster than me last year. But part of it comes from that bingo speed that I talk about, and kind of going off of those players. They maybe focus a little bit more at 20%. But moving on to Division 1 and becoming speed bullied, it's definitely a challenge to route if you are. How do I word this? It's definitely interesting. It's definitely an interesting challenge to be slow, because I don't think that being slow means you can be bad at bingo. You look at one of the players like Bry Guy, and Bry Guy is one of the best bingo players by far. Now, what I find really interesting, however, though, is I think that speed is kind of more important than people realize, honestly. And my argument for this is, you look at who's top and bottom in every division. Like, the top of each division has usually the fastest players near the top. SM27, Samu, Ramato, JJ all have a 114 and any percent. Annie, a very consistent 115 runner. You look at Division 2, Peaches is up there. Mason, Tober, not a ton of like super fast players. Like everyone's kind of like merged together, but Peaches, is one of the faster. Then you get to Division 3, which is like Libre, Juka, all very fast. And Urbani, of course, for 117 or 116. Sorry, don't
Yeah.
I do not mean to take his
King.
accomplishment. I'm not using it as my argument that speed is like that important in bingo, but it made me think, like, is the meta evolving and are people just adapting to the point where people's routes are getting good to the point where someone like Bry maybe just doesn't thrive as much as he used to, just because everyone fast is kind of catching up in routing. And I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on that, because like I don't know if it's just or like some kind of incidents that all the faster players kind of lump together at the top each division sometimes, or is there some type of correlation on that? And I'm not really arguing one or the other. It's something that just made me think, kind of thing. So I'm interested to hear what both of you have to say on that.
I guess I'll go first. So I think what you're saying with sort of the meta sort of reaching a new limit where everyone's catching up in routing, I don't know if that's necessarily true across all three divisions. So I can't really speak for Division 1, I'm a small Div 3 boy who doesn't want to step out of his circle of knowledge here. I can't really speak for that, but I will say that a lot of slower players have been able to kind of thrive in Div 3B, such as myself, Lego, and Juan, who are all pretty solidly in the top 5 in our divisions. And Jeff, also comparatively slow in Division 3A, doing solidly. So I definitely think that routing is extremely important, arguably a much more important skill to have than speed, or in the sense that knowing how to tackle a card, like playing for goals on the card. It's definitely a very different place between Division 1 and Division 3.
I mean, yeah, and you also have Division 3 has that wide disparity of speed and also knowledge, right? Like you could put forth the thesis that maybe the indicator of success is more so time embedded with bingo than anything else in Division 3, but then you have sort of standouts like Urbani, like Wild Jeff, who sort of picked it up this season and are doing very well, right? But look at some of the other folks that are at sort of the top of each division. You have Jay Buzzy B, who's sort of returning to bingo after a long time. I think Division 3B exemplifies this a whole lot, right? You have Urbani as the standout, but then Jay Buzzy B, Juan, me, and you are all sort of like have that endemic bingo knowledge, right? And between you, me, and Juan, we are the slow boys. And we're at the top of we're sort of fighting for the top of 3B right now. But I mean, at the end of the day, right? If you take all else being equal, and someone's faster than the other person, as Larvey put it, there's some cards where you just get bullied out of whatever you wanted to do. Like, regardless of how great you have this route put together in your head, if the faster player takes a particular goal that you were relying on, you're sort of dead in the water, right? Because you can't effectively, and you have to effectively route that in as your disadvantage, which means you're already playing at a disadvantage from the get-go, right? So, like, do you try to play for the goals that you know are strongest, or do you try to work around it and try to fit something together and react mid-game? I think you need a lot more routing skill to overcome a speed deficit than you would necessarily need in terms of speed to overcome a routing deficit, if that makes sense. If you think about it on a scale. A pound of speed is worth more than a pound of routing, even though the metaphor breaks down.
I think that's like the most challenging thing for me playing in Division 1 is I feel like I have the core of good routing, but I feel like playing against some of these faster players, and by the way, I'm not saying any of my matches were lost due to speed. I think I have genuinely gotten outplayed and outrouted in every match I've lost, and I think I fully respect and admire my competitors. However, I do feel like sometimes being at a speed disadvantage, it makes me play a little differently. Now, you may think to yourself, I don't want to try to be first to Pinna. And this is something I'm struggling with is like, do I still want to try to contest Pinna and progression on this card, or do I want to just try to play around it? And I did a scrimmage today against Dramato, and I tried to just avoid going to Pinna and Noki because I just was like, I can't win to him against it. But I wasn't too far behind for either of them. Despite some slower things I did, I was only about a minute behind Inoki, maybe at the end of the game. And it certainly makes you just have to rethink your route. I play very differently as well, whether or not I end up routing a card if I'm the slower player or the faster player. It's almost like a completely different game to me. And something that I actually take away from this bingo season is I really want to work on my speed. I think to be a good bingo player, to be at the top of my division, while I can do that with routing, I think there's part of me that knows I cannot be a perfect router 24/7. I cannot be a perfect human. And I think that having that speed to sometimes help you with once in a while a bad routing decision, once in a while you do something that maybe you shouldn't have. I think having that speed almost, while it's not necessary to be great at bingo, it's certainly a helpful tool to help you get through a match. And I feel like as time goes on, I think the people who are slower at bingo and are probably just gonna maybe place a little bit worse than usual, just because the fastest players are becoming really good at routing. Like Samurai Man becoming one of the best bingo players of all time, slowly. SM27
SM as well. Yep.
Yeah. JJ has always been in the talks for maybe being like a top 3 competitor at some point. And of course, like Danny, number 4 right now, is very good at levels. Is a little slower when it comes to blues, but his level shines are insane. So I think as the meta and I think as time evolves, speed is going to be very important. And I think the slower you are, the better you have to play. If that makes any.
Right, you can't afford to make mistakes if you're the slower player, right? You need to, if you're going to have a speed deficit, you need to have the gameplay consistency to back it up, right? You can't be taking deaths, right? You can't be sort of fumbling your flood lists or your hoverlesses. Hoverlesses? You need to be playing closer and closer to perfection to account for any speed differential, which is hard. It's hard to play perfectly. It's hard to play even something close to approaching perfectly. But I want to drill in on this a little bit more, right? Like, is a 1 minute any percent difference really gonna make or break a Division 1 match? Because like if you think about it, like the speed differential in Division 1, right? Like you can't talk about like speed difference without like talking about like Trey, for instance, who held world record, like just like Samu held world record in multiple categories, and is 2-6, right? Obviously notched to win a couple wins, but is it just bingo knowledge? Will Trey become as cracked as Samu after like another season?
I think it's interesting to think about how, as the slower player, the onus is on you to outroute your opponent. Because if you say, I think this is good, so I'm going to go for it, and if the faster player says, I think this is good, so I'm going to go for it, you will most likely lose. And so the slower player, like, they need to learn, how do I set up, you know? How do I play for multiple different goals, you know? Even in,
Yeah,
say, in formats like Invasion, what is my opponent going to start with, and how do I counter it?
correct.
Uh, and there's huge questions like that that I don't know. I think those are gonna come into play eventually, potentially for Div 1, but I still think, I don't know. I think that with any percent times as they are, I think it's not unreasonable to say, like, I can contest Pinna Noki, especially if you take the time to do Delfinos. But if you have, say, like a 150 player versus a 116 player, it may be a lot more difficult to contest pin on Noki, even if you do opt to do faster things.
Right. Yeah, the speed differential in Division 3 can be completely wacky, like you've said, right? Like,
Yep.
Urbani has a 116, right? Who
Yep.
easily outspeeds most of Division 3B, right? But even then, we've seen in matches like versus Mojungo where there is potential to exploit weaker decision making. And I think that that is a clear indicator to me that consistent play and good routing can overcome a speed differential. That being said, it's not going to happen every time. I think speed provides, and I think speed and consistency together provide this advantage in your back pocket that, like Jeff said, can help sort of shore up a weakness, right? Like if you make a mistake, your speed can help you get out of that mistake. If you make a poor routing decision, your speed might make it not punish you as much. And I think that yeah, like you mentioned, the onus is on the slower player to play consistently well and to make the right routing decisions because they don't have that crutch to fall back on.
Yeah. And I think you can't just look at any percent times with some of these things. Like, look at there are a lot of factors that we were kind of touching on earlier. You look at a player like Larvey. Larvey has like a high 118 or a low 119 on the leaderboard. Yet, if you judge by his 120 times and just the gameplay and his ILs, easy 116 player. If you look at Tober, has a 123, hates any percent like nothing else in the world. Can probably sub 120, honestly, or at least like 120. No, I don't know his exact speed. But then there's players like Rick Ricks, before he had to drop, unfortunately. Mr. 116, but Bingo speed-wise was not too great. So you look at these other variables. You look at ILs, you look at 116, 117.
I thought it was 117.
One of those achievements. He's correct. But
he is correct.
Yeah, and as I'm reading in the chat, consistency is huge. And that's going to kind of be interesting to see if the meta ever comes to a point where we are doing like Dide strats for levels, right? Like Dide is known for doing these wild strats that save like 0.1, and it's like, will there ever be a day where people are going to sacrifice consistency and do lots of insane strats that save almost no time, or just really hard strats that save a lot of time? Like Rico 3 hoverless Beyblade comes to mind. We've seen a few players go for it. That does save a significant amount of time, but it is very hard and very punishing. If I don't know about very hard, but it's difficult.
It's
and
punishing,
very punishing
if you mess it up. Right?
Yeah.
You know, really bad timer glitch is another sort of trick in that category where like execution consistency is incredibly valuable, right? And I think to that point, I think that answers sort of, that's my position on it really, is I don't think it's ever going to get to that point. Like I was making like a joke about like the year is 20XX, SMS bingo is played to task levels of perfection, and you have to move to be living within the data center where Bingo Sync is hosted in order to be able to click your goals first, right? I don't think we're ever going to get to that point, because I think that the hard strats are hard because they are inconsistent, right? You will only get them however many runs, right? Dide is a lord because he just keeps doing attempts and he keeps practicing until he can get the run where everything goes right. You know, if you look at the amount of completed runs that someone like Dide has compared to the number of attempts, it's almost as bad as me, and I reset all the fucking time, and I'm terrible at this video game. But that's the thing, and I think that the consistency, I think, ends up being the key here, right? You got to be fast, but if you're inconsistent, you're going to bleed a lot of time to mistakes, and that's what gives a slower player opportunity to take advantage. If you are fast but inconsistent, that is very exploitable.
And there are people who, like, almost as a joke, will say like, "Oh, what if Dide do bingo? He would just win. He would just be he would just be like the best bingo player ever if Dide would be cracked." But I actually don't agree with that right away. I'm like, obviously, if he put the work in and time, yeah, then it would be probably the best bingo player. Like, I do not deny that. If he put the time and effort in and really would understood it, stand it. But as is, I don't think he would. I almost think he maybe would, like, if he didn't put much routing practice in. I don't know if he would win to many people right now. And I think the did a play style of maybe going for these small time saves and losing, a big amount of time. It's a lot more punishing in bingo where 80% you reset the run. You're like, well, that sucks. Maybe
Yeah,
you
but
rage
next
and
one.
you reset. Yeah, but you go to the next one.
Yeah.
Bingo, you
You're stuck with
do
it.
some insane
You're stuck with it for
strat
an hour.
and yeah, you do
Yeah.
some insane strat and fall off and lose 15 seconds. It might just be enough to lose you the game. So I did this like strat for the Rockets, which isn't really that hard in Rico in my match against Mike, and it's really not that hard of a strat, but I still mess it up once in a while. And I timed it after I did like the safest strat possible, and I was only losing about half a second to me doing the fast rocket strat optimally, and it made me say like, I don't care about that half second. Then I would rather every bingo I do, I get to that rocket and I don't mess it up, even if
Yeah.
what I was going
Yeah.
for really isn't that bad. I would love to just completely eliminate that possibility of losing time to it, and that's why I downgrade my strats a lot in bingo. I don't like doing stuff like Serenity Momentum Spin. I don't like
Okay,
the
Mr.
idea
Honey Skip.
of Honey Skip is not that hard. Honey
I
Skip is
kid.
actually it's really not that hard. And that's kind of different sometimes, but like Serenity Momentum Spin, all it takes is one drop spin. You probably
Yeah,
just
and
lost the whole
a death
Yep.
in Serena 2 bleeds so much time because it's such a
Oh God.
slow
I
secret.
hate Serena 2.
Serena 2 is painful, right? And like I think back to like matches against like Urbani even. I died in Serena 2 and that wasted a whole minute. And
Yep.
there was more than one click in that match where if I was a minute ahead, would have been able to click him before Urbani did. And
yeah.
Yep.
one mistake like that can make all the difference, which makes it even harder in this routing versus speed discussion, right? Like consistency for the slower player ends up being so paramount to your success.
And I'm being reminded of Trey versus Bryguy, where Bryguy was in Serena 2, died in either the middle or the end of the secret. I don't know which. And you suddenly look at the end of the game where it was a 60 blues race for Trey to get a row. And Bry missed the mark by just 2 coins. And you think back to that Serena 2, that didn't happen. Trey literally cannot win with that row. It's blocked off. So these mistakes and maybe a lack of consistency and maybe if you go for too hard of strats, it could cost you the whole game. It really just depends. But at the same time, there's aspects like general speed. Like the more you've been playing the game, the faster your inputs are, and that adds up throughout a match, and people may not notice it.
Yeah, you
I
bleed
think
time in that.
I think the future of bingo, while I think stuff like harder strats being incorporated, people being more optimal and more consistent, I think while those can all improve, what I think the real future of bingo is going to be the mind games, where you need to know your opponent so well that you can expect exactly what start they're going to go for or what goals they're going to go for at a certain time with certain mid-game information, and then revealing different information to sort of convince your opponents to go for different goals. I think that's sort of why players like Bry succeed. All I'm saying is that when I scrimmed Bry, like you guys were on call with me, I was questioning all my life decisions.
That's
uh,
true.
it's true. That did happen. And I think sort of getting into your opponent's head, maybe creating sort of a position where they're forced to play for a goal, different things like that. I think those may be like just kind of counterplaying your opponent is always going to be more important than like saving 4 seconds in a momentum spin jump on Serena 2.
Yeah, which then swings it back towards routing, right, in the mental game and the asymmetric information game that is lockout bingo, right? Because we're
Yep.
playing a game of imperfect information that we've constructed atop this 2002 GameCube platformer, right? And I think like it's such a unique way of thinking about playing this game, right? That like not everybody will jive with every aspect of it. Like that psychological aspect may not be something that Dide even likes. So, to just sort of loop back on this talk of like, would Dide be a cracked bingo player? Um, Dide, I don't think is the type of person that would enjoy SMS bingo
No, no, I don't think
on
he
a
would
on a
either.
level. I just don't think Dide approaches this game or wants to approach this game with that particular mindset, right?
Mhm.
This game, rather, this meta game of lockout bingo requires you to have that and relish that mental aspect of play.
It,
And I think that that's going to ultimately favor the routers at the end of the day because I think you can, if you put in the time and the effort, you can improve your speed, right? I put in the time and
yes.
the effort and I've learned the zen of Serena 100s and I have a pretty decent time in that IL now, right? Like you can do that
Yeah.
for lots of things in this game. But being able to cultivate your routing knowledge, I think, will be able to allow you much more success in the long term than necessarily having to rely on your speed for everything.
And there are becoming like goals now, which are becoming very dependent on gameplay potentially as the meta grows. I think to the infinite wall kicks for Lighthouse, Shadow Mario 27
Yep.
would he could. I mean, he didn't necessarily have a great day against Mike, but he has the potential to just at any time during the match say, okay, I don't care about Pinna. I don't feel like doing this. I know my opponent cannot do this before I finish my infinite ball kicks. I'm going to secure, if they show, 16 in Pinna or something, I'm going to go secure Lighthouse, maybe do it right away, delay it as they make the progress towards that. There's discussion right now between like the lily pad timer glitch thing. Just goals like that are there are some goals which can be completely broken depending on how much time you put in learning it. And that becomes, if the meta ever comes to the point where everyone does infinite wall kicks, that is almost like taking away that routing aspect of that goal. Almost.
Does it? I mean, at the end of the day, you're still doing a shine that's slower in that way. And then again, like you can use that, you can use the knowledge that SM, for example, has these tools, and then you can say, okay, you can do that, but I'll win to Noki. Like there is still counterplay.
Yeah, and I mean, like, sure, from a goal balancing perspective, it may we view Lighthouse, we view Lilypad No Fruit Clipping as these pinna rewards, right? They're in the same
Hmm.
pool as, or they're in the same sort of context as other rewards for pinna progression, right? So then maybe now these goals are considered something different, right? That happens all the time, right? And that's something that you fix with the balancing aspect, right? Because the way that bingo is balanced, the way that we select goals that we consider to be representations of aspects of bingo skill, right? Or aspects of skill that we value in the context of a match, right? Can you collect 15 fast blues? Can you route in 7 bluebirds? Can you figure out where you want to get 3 rockets? There's the ways that we commonly do them. There's the ways that we uncommonly do them, and each goal sort of asks of the player, how are you going to fit me into your route, if at all? And I think that skill, that aspect of bingo, is not going anywhere, right? Even if goals become easier to obtain because we discover new tech or we learn new techniques of doing it, we always have that lever of we've built this metagame, right? The community, well, I use that as in the community sense, right? It's mostly Romano and Mike who are doing the sort of goal setting and balancing. But in that sense, we as a community have decided that these are the goals that we value. And we're always going to make sure that we continue to have a set of goals to go for that we feel represents a challenging and fun and engaging metagame. So we have that release valve if we feel like raw speed is too valuable, if we feel like certain goals aren't achieving their intended purpose, we can always tweak it, right? That is the benefit of building this game atop of another game. Is we have this set of rules that exist. It's called Super Mario Sunshine for the Nintendo GameCube. But we've built another set of rules on top that we have complete control over. And we can decide as a community what those rules are and how we want to engage with this base template of this canvas that is Super Mario Sunshine.
I think like that's the beauty of SMS too, right? Is that we were talking earlier like did I enjoy bingo? And like the point of bingo is to have fun at the end of the day, right? Like whether it's by like optimizing a certain strategy and learning like lily pad clip with box game timer, or whether it's learning infinite wall kicks, or even whether it's just playing your favorite IL for 4 hours. It's all about having fun more than anything else.
One of my favorite things in Dingo, is just doing these ILs that don't even really, and you can relate to this, I think.
Very much.
that maybe aren't something you're going to do every day. Like you got your Serena 18, which to be fair is done fairly often. I got my Bianco 20, which you don't do that. You don't do the choreographed route every match. You do it, you're probably going to get some blue. I don't know. Maybe you get like 10 in Bianco 3, or you get some during PD or whatever garbage. But one of the things I look back on is like me and Gravity Beetle were theorizing like Bianco 500s in a secret. Don't do it. It's horrible. But
it doesn't ever make sense too.
It doesn't make sense. It's terrible. It's an awful time. It's cringe. But I had a lot of fun like doing the IL. I had way too much fun like routing it, doing the IL. Even if it was the most like brain. So, yeah, everyone will always get different.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of SMS. Yeah,
that's the beauty of SMS and of bingo in particular. So I guess we strayed a little bit from the routing versus speed topic. I guess the answer, the conclusion we've come to has to be something along the lines of both are valuable, and that speed can sort of help make up for deficits in routing and consistency, but is still exploitable with a good route and with good consistency from the slower player. Is that a good thesis statement to end on?
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
I think it's only going to evolve as time progresses as well, and I think we should revisit this topic maybe next season if this is still going. And
there's a reason why this discussion always comes up. There's a reason why commentators always are talking about routing versus speed in the matchup. It's because it's such an integral part of this game, and everybody approaches it from different axes, and everybody sort of has their ups and downs, and so I think we will be always asking this question: is routing or speed the key to victory? And the answer is, like it oftentimes is, it depends.
Or both. That works too.
Yeah, or both. Both is a good diplomatic answer. All right. Well, that unfortunately brings the second episode of First to 13 to a close. Jeff, it has been fantastic having you on. A lot of great insight from you.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic. Our first Division 1 guest on the podcast. Do not forget that there's more Super Mario Sunshine bingo action coming your way in less than 48 hours. Starting over on Bingothon at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Wow.
Lots of matches this week. It is going to be a bumper crop of games. Let me see if I can pull up who's playing first. The day is going to start off with Linky Haywire. Then we're going to see Bri versus Sid. Dex versus Tom Dollars. It's going to be a big Division 3 match. All kicks
That's
off
huge.
this Wednesday. We are in the twilight weeks of the league, but the competition could not be any more fierce. Definitely not the last week either, because we still got week 8 after this. Be sure to check out sms.bingo for all of the schedules and the standings. Also check out the Discord, sms.bingo/Discord, where we have a channel for the podcast, as well as lots of other discussion. You can scrim, you can meet the folks playing in the league, you can commentate, all that good stuff, get embedded in this wonderful community. That's going to be all from us here. Any final parting words, Tomato, Jeff?
No, thank
Play
you so much for
Serena
having me.
18. No, I kid.
Play Serena 18.
Yep, thank you so much for having me, both of you. Thank you to everyone with the bingo league. Like during COVID, it's life's obviously a little different. And this has been a really amazing distraction and community to be involved in a time where I can't really go out and do anything. So I just want to say thank you to all of you and restreamers, commentators, the competitors. Thank you all so much for just this really good distraction during the pandemic and all that. You guys are, as much as I roast people, you guys are all the best. So thank you so much.
What a heartfelt way to end it.
Damn.
Tomato, any closing word? Tomato, are you able to follow that up, or do we end it now?
Cut it here, man. I don't have anything.
I didn't mean to get so deep, but I said it and I won't take it back.
No, I think it's it's pretty heartwarming. But yep, I'd say all the same things that Jeff said and all over again. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you guys next week, next Monday for episode 3. Wherever you get your podcasts or right here on twitch.tv/Sunshine Community. This has been Lego, Tomato, and our special guest, Jeff. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again real soon.
See ya.